You might think it should be the other way around. It sounds like I misspoke there, but no, 0 is true.
Well, you're back. Welcome back.
Whoa. Thanks for having me again.
Was it like before the beginning of the year? Was it last year that I had you on, or has it just been a few months?
I want to say it was the end of last year. It was like December we recorded, and I think you released it in like January.
That sounds about right. Did we release the last episode under your alias, BadCop?
Yeah.
I want to say we did. Okay, cool.
I mean, I'm still the same. Alias. I'm still BadCop.
No, you've been transformed because you joined the team.
Oh no, I revealed my identity. It's supposed to be a secret.
So for everyone listening, we recorded in December. We had a great time. BadCop came on the pod. And in the following months, it's now been, 2 months, I think, since you actually joined Boot.dev full time?
I think it's actually been 3.
Wow. Okay, 3 months. And now you're a course author. How do you feel? I
feel like writing is harder than I thought it was going to be. Turns out you weren't lying. It's kind of tricky. You have to it's different syntax. It's very different than the programming languages I'm used to. This English one.
It's a bad one, but it turns out. It's actually one of the worst. It's one of the worst programming languages.
Yeah, it's hard to be specific, but also not too specific, the right amount of specific. It's not a very formal language.
Yeah, this was my hot take with AI is it's actually really hard to tell an AI how to make a system because it turns out English is really bad about specifying things. Writing specs is actually harder than just writing the code sometimes.
I mean, this is the whole thing of why low code and no code was hyped up and then didn't really go anywhere is it turns out it's just hard regardless. The hard part isn't writing the code. Shocker. It's everything else.
Yeah. Well, it's
and also writing the code.
Yeah, I was going to say writing the code is still hard. It's it takes a while to get proficient at writing the code, but once you're proficient at writing the code, it is genuinely easier to write the code than to not in a lot of cases. I look at our entry-level Python courses, and the explanations of the assignment, 100% of the time, are 2 to 3 times the length of the solution to the assignment. It's always the case.
Yeah, it takes a lot more words to get to the same answer.
Well, it's how do I say this? I feel vindicated hearing you say that, because this is how I've been feeling for a while now. It actually is really hard to write good courses. It's not as trivial as just, I don't know, putting instructions on the paper, writing steps. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it to make it entertaining, to make it fun, to make it engaging. It takes a lot longer to write a course than it does to take a course.
Oh, definitely. Maybe we should have a course on writing courses, and then I could take that and then
give away all our trade secrets.
It'll just be an internal course. You have to be.
Okay. What's been the hardest part? So let me kind of give our listeners my process for how I'm creating most of these courses, and to kind of seed your brain with how I'm doing things. And then I want to hear I'm going to ask you a couple questions about it. So when I approach writing a course, the very first thing I do is make this giant unordered list of all the crap I want to teach in the course. I usually don't even start with a title. I kind of start with an idea. So okay, students on the platform don't have any instruction surrounding, let's say, networks, just as an example, how networks work. Okay, I want to make a course on networks. So I just make this big unordered list, everything that I can think of that's possibly related to networks that someone would expect to be covered in a course about networks. And then I just go through kind of trimming the unordered list, mush it into some form of ordered list. So take the unordered concepts, order them somewhat, and I try to break them out into chapters, just because I like the chapters to feel coherent and cohesive, right? So we're moving from one concept to the next, which is actually really hard to do, especially because you're trying to keep the whole thing linear. Sometimes it's really tempting to move concepts up or down outside of chapters, and that can be that can make the hierarchy a little messy. So once I have that like high level outline, then I write the explanations for all of the concepts. Then I start building all of the challenges. And if it's like a project based course, then I'll usually build like the end project first and kind of work backwards from there. In your process, what's like the hardest part? And when I say hardest, I mean like what takes the most of your like energy to get through?
Yeah. So I tried your process of like come up with a topic, very broad topic, and then just write everything down. And I did that, and then we kind of I feel like we lost sight of the goal a little bit. And now I've split it out into like 2 courses that I'm planning to write. And so that part is definitely tricky of like figuring out the base level of like what goes in this course, what things are actually related and make sense to be presented in like a ordered list, like you say. That took more time than I thought it would.
So you're talking about how like we started with learn, like it was going to be some sort of like learn like shells and terminals, or like learn Linux. Like we weren't quite sure what angle we wanted to take, but it was like maybe this like learn advanced Linux stuff, and it's like shifted into like sysadmin stuff.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. So we're working on a like learn the basics of administrating your own like Linux server. Not necessarily because that's a thing you'll be doing a lot, but all of the individual parts of that are like useful skills to learn. So like learning how to connect to a server via SSH, learning how to copy files with rsync, learning how like all of these like individual things that can be used pieced together like cron and systemd. You're not necessarily going to use all of them all the time, but it is very useful to know about them and what they do and sort of the basics of how they work. So that's kind of the goal right now. And then after that, maybe we'll do an actual advanced shells and terminals.
Yeah,
that's like
it was funny how like we started with some sort of advanced shells and terminals, and we ended with all right. Actually, this is like Linux administration, like not LAMP stack, but like the reason I think of LAMP stack is like in college I had this course that was effectively like deploy your own LAMP stack, so Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP on like a little virtual private server. I think we're going to be doing something similar, but like just not with that stack, right?
Yeah, we'll do Go.
Go's good.
Go is good. Kind of.
I'll pay you later.
It's almost it's I won't bait you too hard.
we agree to disagree on that one. Hey, we have, since you have joined, we now have like 2 or 3 bash scripts committed to our mono repo. Before I don't think we had any.
Yeah, it's good. It's growing. Before you just had one ZSH script, which is an interesting choice.
Well, we're all on MacBooks aside from you. And so it just felt natural.
It's definitely not natural. Scripting in ZSH is, I mean, you can do it, but it's kind of weird.
We have shells and terminals. We need like an actual bash scripting course at some point that obviously you will be writing. And
what?
I
you don't
need
want to do
course. I don't know how to write a script in bash. Like I can read it. It's like how I learned Spanish. I'm pretty fluent in Spanish. I can listen to Portuguese. I can understand it. It's like I read a bash script. I'm like, I get what's going on here. But like I can't remember all the syntax off the top of my head. So I always have to Google stuff to remember how to do loops and conditionals. I always forget the syntax.
Conditionals are tricky. You just got to remember that 0 means true and anything else means false. And then that once you get past that, you might think it should be the other way around. It sounds like I misspoke there, but no, 0 is true.
It sounds like I misspoke there. It's the literal inverse of JavaScript, right? Where 0 is falsy and like anything else, any other number is truthy.
Yeah. Like any other language pretty much does it that way.
It's because 0 is the exit code success, right?
Yeah. So they're like, wouldn't it be convenient if you could test if something was successful by just doing if the thing? So that means 0 is true.
So it has to evaluate to true. Yeah. Was 0 as the success code like at the I guess that would be the operating system level? Like was that a mistake? Or was that the right call?
I mean, what else would it be? Like
A 200?
I don't know if you
I
can
don't think it should be
do
200.
200 because I think it's signed on some systems. So 200 would
Oh
be
God.
potentially a negative number.
You mean like it's signed one byte?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
pretty
didn't even
good.
realize you were restricted to 1 byte. Oof. Yeah,
Yeah.
200 definitely be too high. Yeah, I don't know what else you'd do.
I'm familiar with this because Bash Stack actually does some pretty cool things with the return codes, because a
Okay.
script is basically like an endpoint in Bash Stack. And so when you want to return a status code, you just return that value as your exit code. Except
Right.
most of the like HTTP status codes are out of range of what you might want to return. So I do some pretty cursed things to like pack the useful ones into the byte. Like I encode them, and then on the other end I decode them as like, okay, 0 is 200 because of course it
Okay, so you
is.
just mapped all
And
the
then
useful ones.
yeah. So you get like, I think I chose like 200 to 264, 300 to 364, 400 to 464, and 500 to 564. And that's like the full set that you can use.
It's funny that like as soon as you said it's 1 byte, I was like that makes so much sense because so whenever I'm writing exit codes for my programs, I think 100% of the time in my career it's been 0 or 1. It's been
Those are good
0
ones.
success, 1 failure. Yeah, and 95% of the time when I'm encountering like other people's codes or other people's code or applications, it's 0 1. But then the other one that I occasionally see is 127. So it's like it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense that it would be that multiple of 2. Anyways, okay, cool. How did we get back to Bash Stack on the
I
second
always find
episode
a
with you on
way.
here?
Bash Stack finds a way.
I was gonna say we were talking about Go and how you're probably gonna use Go in this like kind of Linux sysadmin-y type course that really the purpose of it is less to make you a sysadmin and more to like give you access to all these tools for interacting with a remote server and configuring stuff on a remote server. At the moment, we have this like weird thing in our curriculum, I would argue, where you learn how to write Go and deploy Go, but we use a lot of like what I would consider cloud native stuff, like very Docker, very Kubernetes, very serverless functions. How useful do you think it is for students to know how to work outside of those sort of like cloud native offerings and kind of Go? I know it's not bare metal because it's still like a VPS, but like, just have
It's,
access to a
yeah,
server.
virtual bare metal. I would say it depends on what you're doing. Like if you're working somewhere that is like truly does serverless everything, nobody actually does that, by the way. So like most jobs you're going to find don't, if they use serverless, they're not fully on it. They still have things that run on a server. And even your serverless stuff is like running on a server, you just don't have access.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think a lot of these things are useful, particularly in situations where, and this isn't something you'll be doing a lot as like a junior developer or anything, but like outage situations is the place that I most commonly used all of these tools. And knowing
Yeah.
how to use them was really good because some other people on my team didn't know how. And they're like, well, what do we do? And I'm like, well, we can just connect to the database and then just download stuff. Like, we can just fix it. And they're like, what? You can do that?
Wait, you mean with like PSQL? It's like, no. We can get onto the box.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good point because and it sounds like you actually have more experience with this than I do. Like because I would typically think of my databases. So in the past, I did a lot of Postgres and I did a lot of Elasticsearch. And as an application developer, it's really useful to think of those things as like fairly black boxes, right? Like you connect to the Postgres database with the Postgres connection string, and then you like interact via SQL. Same with Elasticsearch. You get some kind of connection string, a URL, and now you can make kind of structured queries to the Elasticsearch cluster. But then when things go wrong and Elasticsearch isn't responding, not only like do you need to SSH onto the server, but it's especially confusing because it's a cluster. So there's like 17 of them. You get to like hop onto an individual node and like see if you can ping the other nodes from that node. And it gets kind of hairy. I can see why some people would assume you don't need to know, just because 95% of the time you might not need to know. But then the 5% of the time, like, God forbid you have no one on the team that knows how, and it can be disastrous.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. Maybe I'm biased because like I use SSH as part of my daily workflow.
Oh, you order coffee too?
No, yes, but God. So on my stream, people constantly ask me this question. They're like, "You have the Linux tag, but you're on Windows. Like, what's up with that? Are you using WSL?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "VirtualBox?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "I have two computers. One runs Linux, one runs Windows. The Windows one I stream from, and then I SSH into the Linux one." And for some reason, this is never something that like even crosses anybody's mind to ask. They just assume that it's all one computer. But
it is weird that no one assumes. It doesn't. Do you know Dax? I think Dax has the same setup.
I know Dax.
No, he's full Linux actually. I can't remember, but I swear he SSHs onto something. I think when he travels, which I guess you do that too, right? When you travel, you SSH back home.
Yeah, I run a VPN locally, and then I just connect to it, and it's as if I'm on my local home network wherever.
Okay, can we tell that story really quick about when you traveled to Utah? This might be a really good story.
Yeah, so I set up Tailscale a long time ago as my like home VPN solution, and I didn't realize that they like expire keys, and I didn't have anything set up for that. And so I went to Utah and I connected to my VPN, and I couldn't talk to any of my devices. And I was like, "Oh, this is unfortunate." Like, I don't have a setup on this laptop to do local development. It's supposed to just phone home and do the work there. So I had to go on a bit of a journey to hack my own network, which is legal, by the way, because you can hack yourself. It's fine.
You can steal your own things.
But it was fun. I had to find holes in my own network, and it turned out my network attached storage was a little bit exposed, and I connected to it via the like web interface, and then I installed Tailscale on it, and then using that I was able to very primitively talk to my other devices, because the NAS doesn't have like a lot of tools installed or a package manager to install them. So you're kind of limited with whatever you have there. So it was a fun journey to download my keys and then hack into my other machine and then refresh the Tailscale.
And then you were able to connect like normally, right? By the time you got the keys all. Yeah, that would have been unfortunate because we were all up at so everyone on the Boot.dev team, we were all up staying at an Airbnb in northern Utah, and we were like trying to do something, and you sit down and you're like, oh crap. I have this phone-based laptop. Actually, you didn't end up using that one, did you? Like phone.
Oh, I got it working. Yeah. It's a what is it? It's a old Palm folding keyboard. And they're really cheap because they're useless. because the connector on them is, it doesn't connect to anything that like still exists. It's like only the Palm Pilot connector, and nobody has a Palm Pilot. So somebody on the internet like reverse engineered this thing. Shout out to somebody on the internet, and they reverse engineered it and they made a little Bluetooth adapter you could put on there, and then you can use it as a Bluetooth keyboard. So it's like, it's so great because the keyboard itself is really cheap, but it's really awesome. Like as a physical keyboard, it's a really
Because it
nice
fits in your
keyboard.
pocket, right?
It fits in your pocket, but also like for a keyboard that fits in your pocket, it's really nice. It's very similar to like the old ThinkPad keyboards.
Okay. Yeah.
Which are pretty popular.
Well, that was a good adventure. I'm for just like, I have one follow-up question. I think for some people listening, they might not know what a NAS is. Can you explain what that part of the little vulnerability was?
Yeah, so that's another. I have a lot of computers, and this particular one is, it's a very simple computer, with a bunch of hard drives in it. The idea being like, you have limited space on your computer, probably, especially if you have a laptop, and you can get all these like external drives or whatever, or you could buy, Dropbox or something premium to get the more storage, or you can buy like a physical storage device and connect it to your network, and then you can just transfer files over Ethernet or Wi-Fi. So I use that. I like self-host my own like Photos server that I keep everything on, because I was tired of Google Photos like compresses everything quite a bit, and I wanted to store like the actual photos. I store some other stuff on there. I don't store all of my Twitch VODs, but some of them, ones I like plan to edit later.
Okay. So is it like a purpose-built computer for network storage? Is it like, do you have to have specific software installed? Is it a Linux server? Like, what actually is
There's
it?
different ones, but usually it's purpose built. Like they have, so I have one from Synology, and they ship it with their own little like operating system thing. I mean, it's just Linux, but they've got their own little web desktop thing that you can access it through, and a bunch of
So like
other
serves
nice
an
things.
HTML page or something for you to interact, kind of like a router would.
Yeah, they're one of the more like premium brands in the space, I would say.
Okay.
But like the other ones aren't necessarily worse. It's just like you're going to be setting up a lot of the stuff yourself, and this is the batteries included one.
That doesn't sound like you, to be honest. Like,
I
it
know,
sounds a little
As
off-brand.
I was saying it, it didn't sound right, but this was one of those things that I didn't want to put a lot of effort into. I just wanted it to work.
Oh man. Okay. Speaking of your brand and doing things that just work, what problem do you have with just using VTuber software off the shelf?
I don't have any problem. Other than I just have no idea how. Like I haven't looked into any of it.
Wait, hold on. So are you making the point that it's easier for you to write your own, or just that you haven't done any research at all?
I have done zero research, but I know that if here was my thought process, right? My background is in programming. I'm not the most artistic person there ever was.
I've seen your art. It's pretty good.
It's not, it's not professional grade. It's very amateur.
It's not detailed. It's good.
So my solution was, if I program this thing like from scratch, then it's like the weird like quirks about it will become what like is good about it. Like that will be the artistic part, is the strange ways it behaves that are different from everybody else. This was sort of the idea. And also like I can make content out of writing it on stream. Um, and if I have more control, then I can do more stuff in like shaders, which I know how to do, versus like Photoshop, which I don't know how to do.
Photoshop's really hard.
Yeah, there's a lot of buttons.
Yeah, that's like the main thing. I'm sure it's not actually that hard to use in the sense that like there's buttons and they already are pre-programmed to do things. I just am overwhelmed by the interface. There's just so many things to click on.
Yeah, I mean that's the same way I feel about JetBrains. Like, I open that editor and I'm like, why are there so many buttons? Am I supposed to click on them? Are they just decoration? Like,
I doubt they're decoration. I hope they're not decoration.
I think they might be. VS Code has a lot of buttons too, and I'm just like, I don't need that.
You're a NeoVim user, right?
NeoVim doesn't have any buttons. It's great.
When did you switch from? Actually, I'm assuming. When did you switch from Vim to NeoVim, or were you always on NeoVim?
I did. Yeah, no, I started on Vim. When was that? That was probably a few years ago. It's relatively recent. Basically in college, I was doing a bunch of projects for courses, and I knew there were a lot of different editors, and I knew like editor wars were this big thing. And so I made it my goal to, every time I had a project for school, to do it in a different editor. So I used like, Notepad, Notepad++. I used Atom. I used VS Code. It was still really new at the time, I think. The Visual Studio, Eclipse, JetBrains, all your good editors. Also Vim and Emacs, just like vanilla.
That's okay. That's incredibly impressive. And as someone who literally hired you 2 months ago, like that, honestly, like that should be on your resume. I don't know how you like humble brag about it though, but like just knowing that
I was not good at any of them. I just
I know
was like
you were
trying them
like,
out. I was like test driving them, ruining the transmission as you shift the gears.
Like I didn't do that shit. Like I was just getting the projects done, like keeping my head above water in school. The fact that you're just like, I guess I'll just like try a new editor on every single project, play this game in hard mode. Like
the setup that I ended up on was unbelievable. It was very similar to my setup today, just like way cheaper budget hardware because I didn't have any money. Yeah. So I had a Chromebook. The Chromebook was my laptop, and at home I had a server, which was a Raspberry Pi, and I would connect to the Raspberry Pi and use it as my like development server.
So were you on Raspbian?
I was on Raspbian. The university I went to used they had like a distributed file system that you could connect to store stuff called Andrew File System. And I really wanted to set it up so that I could like mount it on my Raspberry Pi. And there are all these guides. They're really old because AFS is pretty old at this point. And I ended up, the way I got it to work was I went into an IRC channel. I forget what, I think it was maybe just like one of the Raspberry Pi IRC channels. And it was pretty quiet, and I just found some random stranger just helped me through setting up AFS, which involved recompiling the Linux kernel on my Raspberry Pi, which took hours.
The whole kernel?
Yeah. It doesn't compile very quick on a Pi, it turns out.
I don't think does it even compile quick in general?
Compared to the several hours that it took. But this stranger stayed with me the whole time and then helped me set this thing up. Like, I maintain that if you have a really hard problem that's like really niche, you need to seek out an IRC channel. There's someone somewhere sitting on that IRC channel just waiting to help you.
For our younger audience, IRC is like you could I hesitate to make the analogy to Discord, but like it's basically chat rooms that are hosted It's like distributed Discord with way less features.
Yeah, it's more like, well, I mean, even TeamSpeak is kind of old now, but
Yeah.
it's just a chat server. Internet Relay Chat is what it stands for.
Yeah.
Very simple, but there was something about the like barrier to entry that kept a lot of people out, I think, which is why you could find these people if you just did a little digging.
Yeah.
Because like on forums and stuff, the experts would get annoyed and like leave
Yeah.
because there were just way too many people flooding with questions.
Okay, let's nerd out about this for a second because this is the topic I've thought a lot about. There's like this dichotomy between making something super accessible to everybody and like keeping the quality of the thing like really high. And I'm specifically talking about like communication, like like forums and chat rooms and things like that. It's surprising how little friction you need to add to something to like ensure that the people that are there want to be there and like want to contribute and want to be helpful. Like you said, like IRC is not that hard. um you know I think if you're like relatively good with computers, you could probably figure it out in, what would you say, less than an hour
Took me years.
just to figure out how to connect and chat.
Like because there were like I used what I mean by years, like I used browser clients for the longest time.
Yeah, but that counts, right? You're on the
all of
server.
the clients that you would install like were too complicated in your terminal for me. I was a GUI user.
But like that still counts, right? Like you were using it through a browser, but it's
Well,
like higher
according to
friction
the
than
other people in the IRC, it didn't count. And when they would see me connect with, the browser client, they'd be like, "Oh God."
Did it like shame you? Did it?
Yeah.
Does it say the browser? Oh no, I didn't use them that much. I think I connected to like 2 or 3 different IRCs about a little over a decade ago, but not enough to remember that it shames you for the client that you use. Yeah, I think it's a really difficult balance to strike. Like we do this thing in our Discord on Boot.dev where like we require that you have synced an account, which is like just it's free, but it's like friction. It's like you can't just like pop in and start posting links to your shit until you've synced your account, and that raises the bar quite a bit and actually just filters out a ton of spam that we'd have otherwise. And then we've done some other things, but it's hard because like I want our chat rooms to be accessible and for anyone to be able to use them, but it's almost like you just need people to show that they're willing to put in effort, and then I want it to be accessible to them.
I don't even really mean spam, because spam's more of a modern problem. You used to be able to fight spam by just you put a captcha on there, and then it's foolproof. Like nobody can spam anymore. But now you can just like it's way too easy to get past these things. You can see like the arms race of captchas evolving on Twitter and TikTok. It's way more complicated than it used to be to fight spam. It's a little bit of a cultural shift that's happened on the internet. I feel like in general, especially in programming spaces, everyone used to be a lot more rude on the internet, or like matter of fact. And I think now people are a lot friendlier. As a result of that, like there would be people who would like ask questions without like trying anything, right? Like they'd be like, I got an error and I'm hard stuck because there's an error. And no, I didn't try changing the code because there's an error and it's scary. And it's like, I think there used to be a lot more of like people on forums would like shame you for doing that.
Yeah.
As opposed to now, which I don't necessarily think was a good thing, but it's definitely a shift.
Yeah. The good of the old culture was that it stopped people from being almost rude in a different way, like rude in the sense that they were demanding other people's time to help them without putting forth any effort themselves. And then of course the bad thing was that like people were just like rude to each other in the chat rooms and like everyone's mean to each other. I think that it's still good to enforce those cultural things. Like for example, nothing bothers me more than when someone hops into our Discord and their question is something that's like the most easily Googleable thing in the world. They hear a term that they're not familiar with, and they just ask, like, what is term? Right? Wait, what is PHP? It's like, you'll probably get a much more useful answer, and it's like more detailed and with images and everything if you just like plug that into Google, rather than like asking everybody else to type up a paragraph explaining what PHP is to you. And so like I do think rules like that and enforcing them, like you don't have to be an asshole about it, but like I do think that does create higher quality chats. That like when people do ask questions, they're putting in effort. They're pasting whatever their error code is instead of just saying that they got an error. Keeping that culture alive, I do think, is important.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that's the difference though, is like people did just used to be like total assholes about it. Like
yeah. And it did keep like it did turn people away, which sucks. But like
yeah.
it sucks because like a lot more people would have gotten into code, I'm sure, than did. But it also like the quality of code that was produced, you could argue maybe was high as a result of that, because like you had to get over this huge barrier. So I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know if that barrier was really a test of anything other than like your tolerance for
Will you put up with it? Yeah.
for people being mean.
That's true. And I hate it. Like that, honestly, that's one of the things that like nothing makes me want to like leave something behind than when I have to deal with people that are rude or mean. Like I just don't like it. It's a personal thing, but I do not like working with people that I don't have a good time working with. Like I'll just go find another project.
It's interesting, like, because I grew up in that era where everybody was like matter of fact, and that's just like the way you typed. And I've definitely changed that a lot, but I think there's still elements of it there that were influenced. I once had somebody at a previous job in like a peer review tell me that I was like an intimidating presence on Slack until they met me in person. And I was like, that's really interesting feedback. Like, I don't know what to do with this. Like,
was it just because you didn't give enough like emojis and smiley faces or something?
No, they said I was like intimidatingly correct, which I still don't know how to parse that feedback. Like,
that is weird.
Like I was just too.
Be nice if you were wrong every once in a while, because then it would make us all feel better.
Yeah, I just need to be wrong more. Which is what I've been trying. That's my whole Twitter account is me trying to fix that. So
oh, that's what you're going for there. I had no idea. Huh. Okay.
I seem to have upset the Java people yesterday by saying that getter and setter functions should be a felony to write.
I saw that tweet. I agreed with it. I and like let's just air this one. Let's just get this one out in the open. When you say getter and setters, do you mean like getters and setters that like don't do anything other than like assign and retrieve a value from a private member in a class?
Absolutely.
Like, I agree.
They're like,
it makes no
all members of the
me.
class need to be private because of reasons, and so we'll have a getter and setter function. Maybe the setter is protected instead of public because, you know, other people don't really need to be setting this value. They should just be getting it. It's like, I think the like public private controls in programming languages are way overused. Like,
oh, see, now I'm disagreeing, but keep going.
I really think you only need to use private things when you're like exposing some sort of API, like across some boundary, like you're making a library, or, you know, even an internal library for your project. Like I don't think you need everything to be private by default. I think that's silly.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I also think Go's solution for public and private is extremely silly. And
hey, we just like capitalize things. It's like obvious. Why wouldn't that be how it works?
Great for reading. It's horrible for refactoring. It's so annoying every time.
I will admit the amount of times when I do like find and replace that I have to like toggle the little thing in VS Code to like be case sensitive or not is pretty often, and it's only for that reason. So okay, so first thing you said, I completely agree. Like you've got a private data member in like a class or a struct or whatever. You're trying to encapsulate something. If you're just going to expose a public getter and setter, in my view, the thing itself should just be public. Like that makes no sense. Where I draw the line is like, okay, I've got some data that like the user of this class or of this component or of this function or whatever, they don't really need to know about it. I'll make that private. And like the hard line where I would say like it goes from being never do this to okay, maybe this makes sense, is if the getter or setter does some sort of like inherent transformation on the thing. It like hides the I should say it adds some functionality.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. I don't particularly like, I don't know if you are familiar with any languages that do like the you can make like getter and setter functions that appear as though they're being accessed as the property. Like JavaScript has this, C# has this. It's like you'll do a property access, but then secretly behind the scenes, it's calling your function on the class.
Yeah, there's some
I don't
behavior.
like that. I don't like that.
I agree. I think that happens in Ruby too. Am I making that up? I haven't done enough Ruby.
I haven't done very much Ruby either.
But yeah,
But
so you do like dot variable name, so it looks like you're just accessing some data, but in fact, a function's being called under the hood.
Yeah,
I agree. That's. Are you saying that's cursed? Because like I think.
Yeah,
that's
I think that's pretty cursed. Like I get the reason they added that, which is like, you know, it makes refactoring to change something to be a getter easier, but it just makes it like unclear when you're reading or using this thing what's actually happening.
You're not going to go dig for implementation that you assume isn't there.
Yeah. And as somebody who spent a lot of time like troubleshooting performance of programs in the past, like I hate you clever programmers for burying things so deep. Like if the code's readable, it's so much easier to figure out why it's slow.
Yeah. Okay, so I agree with all of those takes. The one little bit that I think you'd mentioned was like maybe people. Now I'm going to put words in your mouth. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Were you saying that like basically maybe people are overusing the idea of encapsulation?
Sort of. Yeah, like it depends on what you mean by encapsulation. I like personally like let's use like JavaScript as an example. I like encapsulation because it goes a bad example here. I like encapsulation at the like module level, right? Like I'll export some set of functions from my module and that's my like interface to this module. And like if for some reason I'm using a class in JavaScript, probably everything's just public. Like I wouldn't export a class that like has some like I just don't I don't think the class model of visibility is very good.
It's interesting because like every programming language has like different natural boundaries. So like, yeah, in Java or Python, it's like you encapsulate at the class level potentially, or in JavaScript,
yeah, because the classes are your
level.
modules in Java, like
yeah,
kind of mostly.
And in Python, it's like kind of it could be both. It could be at the file level or the class level, but like I don't know. I think a lot of Python programmers kind of think at the class level.
Wait, hold up. You're using classes in your Python?
Oh, me? No, God. But this is a thing that happens in the Python world.
Oh no,
got to be clear.
I thought they just added that as like a marketing stunt.
It was just a meme.
Yeah,
that got out of control. No, yeah, Python's very object oriented. Like if you do anything with Django, like it's all class hierarchies.
I would never.
Yeah, so Python class level or Java class level, you got kind of JavaScript maybe at the file level with modules, and then it's at the directory level. Very often. You could argue that sometimes it's at the struct level, but like for the most part, it's at the directory level. And I don't know, you just have to be like super aware of that because it means you have to think about how you do your encapsulation very differently.
I just don't think you need that much encapsulation. Like, I don't think it's that useful. I don't know. What does it get you?
I see. Here's my take. I think encapsulation is arguably one of the best. It's like one of
Whoa.
my favorite tenets of programming is good encapsulation. Like, good is the operative word. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, I guess. But like when you can take some big complex piece of code and like nicely hide it behind, some function call, or kind of package it all nicely into some sort of struct so that you can hide a lot of that implementation. Like,
But why does it need to be like literally inaccessible? Why does it matter? Like you can still have a function that encapsulates things without like, making everything else a secret that nobody can access ever.
so I think the
Is it
biggest
because like I'm just thinking out loud, but like you're building like these assumptions that like nobody outside of this can change these things?
Yeah, I think you're codifying those assumptions. I think in a lot of ways it's similar to static typing. In the like, I made this variable, I want it to be a float 64 or whatever. I don't want to ever accidentally think that it's a string. So like static typing helps me there. I'd argue like encapsulation is kind of like that. It's like, okay, I made this thing. I never want to accidentally like directly use this thing. Like I actually want to access it this other way that like makes some changes first. Right? Like when I get this data, for example, maybe I always want to strip out like sensitive user data when I get it. So I'm going to put it in this nice little package and like give myself a getter that strips out all like the sensitive information, just so that I never like accidentally do it, or so that another programmer doesn't accidentally do it.
Sure. I just think this is like a symptom of like highly stateful code, as opposed to like at the end of the day, most of my code is just a bunch of functions, and I try not to make them have state where possible.
I'm definitely not saying that we are not guilty of over engineering a lot of things, because I do think that's the case. I will say the place where I think this is most important. So I would agree that at the application level, maybe a lot of people are overusing encapsulation. It's like you're building an application. It's like, yeah, you kind of just like write reasonable functions, right? Package your data into structs or classes or whatever you're doing in your paradigm in a reasonable way, and like you'll probably be okay. When you're building like a library for others to consume, I actually think you have to be extremely careful about the encapsulation bit, right? Because you're exposing dependencies at that point that like you won't be able to change later without making a breaking change.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think choosing you want a very narrow like public API when you're making a library, because whatever you put out there you have to support for the rest of time.
Yeah.
And that's annoying. But I think people like within their own code do too much of this, like drawing these boundaries of like, all right, this is the API of this part of my code, and it's like it's all the same application. Like I don't know. But then some people will take these and like, because generally at a company you have multiple applications, and they'll have like this part of this application is actually a library that gets used in this other part. I don't think that's good. I don't think you want organically grown libraries like that.
Okay, I'm starting to get behind what you're saying. Like I at least agree from a high level, and I'm going to actually give another example of where I agree even more. Let's say it's less to do with encapsulation maybe, and more to do with like creating common interfaces. Are you familiar with like dependency inversion principle? This is like very popular in Java. So this is a very popular idea in Java. I think it's really heavily influenced by like Uncle Bob Martin's like clean code, clean architecture kind of way of thinking about things. And basically the idea is this. You've got a database, let's say a Postgres database.
Oh no, this is where the problems start.
And you want to get a user. Like, God forbid, you want to get a user out of that database. Mm-hmm. Well, you could, write select star from users where ID equals 1. You could do that. Or we could make this nice little interface where you do, storage layer dot get user and pass in an ID. And that interface, we could map that onto any database in the world. That could work for Postgres. That could work for MySQL. That could work for Elasticsearch. It doesn't matter. It could work for your file system. And this is the idea. It's like, okay, we're going to create interfaces, And we can swap out all of our implementations of these externalities, and we'll never have to change our business logic, our sacred fucking business logic. It'll never have to change. This is an idea that I think has been taken way too far, because basically every time I run into it in the real world, it's like, no, actually, I need a lot of Postgres specific features. And if I try to hide it behind like a super generalized interface, not only will I not even get access to those features unless I hack my own interface, but oftentimes I like can't do the more performant thing because I'm like stuck behind this this kind of static interface.
It's solving for a problem that doesn't exist. Like you're not gonna just switch databases. You're just not. You're gonna stick with the one you were using in the beginning. Like
I would say counterpoint. I have switched a lot of databases in my life. I just do not think in any of those scenarios that having this in place would have actually made it any easier. Because like we still would have hacked around the interface. So like we still would have all this terrible migration stuff to do.
Yeah, like, well, I don't know why you're switching databases so often, but I would just avoid that.
Skill issues mostly. Yeah. Maybe at better companies, it doesn't happen as often. I don't know.
Maybe you shouldn't have picked Mongo. I don't know.
Okay, cool. I think we mostly agree there. There's at least some nuance that hopefully will give some listeners something to think about. I want to wrap up talking a little bit about this VTuber project again. Can you show us what it is you've been building?
Sure. It's this thing. It's me.
It does look. What are like some of the trade-offs here? So like if you had used something off the shelf, like is your thing more responsive? Is it more customized? Like what's this is pretty impressive.
I don't know. Other things are probably just better in almost every way. I don't think there's any real benefit I get from doing it myself other than it's subtly different and I can control every aspect of it if I like don't like something about it. I'm a little bit
of like looking really good, and then just a couple times like the mouth stayed open. But
yeah, the mouth is
the eyes separately.
Yeah, but they're not. The tracking isn't super good, so it's like it doesn't really know.
That's pretty
it's
cool.
Still a work in progress.
Yeah, and this is what you're doing. Are you still currently doing this over on your Twitch stream?
Yeah, I have some more stuff I want to do with it, but it's like at a good enough state that I could use it as is.
This is not BadCop. This avatar.
What do you mean?
There's a cowboy hat.
It says sheriff. Okay,
I'll
level with you. I didn't make the hat. I found it online. I'm gonna make my own hat. I just haven't got that far yet. 3D modeling is hard. Cool. Okay.
Oh yeah, I can't even imagine. Very cool. Well, thanks for coming back on. I'm super excited about the sysadmin course that you're working on. Everyone can go find you. Where do you want everyone to go find you? Is Twitch the best place?
Yeah, Twitter, Twitch, BadCop _.
BadCop
unfortunate.
The underscore.
The underscore is my greatest shame.
It's funny, like half the people I bring on, like as guests, when we get to this part and they plug their Twitter and their Twitch and everything, roughly half have a username with like either an unfortunate number or an unfortunate underscore that they're just like apologizing for.
It's the funniest thing because like I was early enough on all of these sites to like have whatever username I want for the most part. But I just picked such a dumb, stupid username back then and ended up changing it like a few years ago. Because I just rolled with this really dumb username for a long time.
I did the same thing about 4 or 5 years ago. I like switched all of my handles across like all socials to be the same thing for like consistency because I got sick of trying to remember what everything was everywhere. And
GitHub is like the one where it's like the most difficult to find the username you want. I found like there was nothing available.
It never auto completes when I'm trying to tag you on GitHub because I always try to either write BadCop or Sarah, and every single time I get caught by that.
My bad.
Cool. All right, go check out BadCop on Twitch, on Twitter. She's also in the Boot.dev Discord. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.